Need to set up the recording here and then we'll get started. Okay, got everything going there. Ran into a minor space issue, of course, as soon as I started recording. But I think we're good to go and we can go ahead and get started. So my name is Seth Cousins. I work here at Cireson as the product owner for the Service Manager line of products. So basically direction and working with all you fine people, making sure that we can meet as many of your needs as we possibly can based on the resources we have and the timelines we put out. Not an easy job, a lot going on, a lot of movement, but thanks to all of our great customers, it's pretty fulfilling as well. So I appreciate you all being here today. Today we're going to be looking at enhancing productivity with customizations in the Cireson portal for Service Manager. There's lots of stuff coming down the road for this. One of our key things is to make the portal as customizable as possible, while of course being able to still maintain the level of support that we have. So you'll see some future things on this as well as we continue to move forward and iterate. And then also we have a universal sort of customization that we're going to try and apply across a series of our products, including the Configuration Manager portal in the not too distant future. So some of what you learn here today may actually be able to be applied not too far in the future to things like the Configuration Manager portal and other products that we might be releasing. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and carry on. Let me bring up my questions here just in case I have any. So, all right. So first things first, how Cireson helps you. Cireson focuses on service management, asset management, configuration manager, and then consulting services. So obviously today we'll be focusing on service management and the Service Manager portal. But we also do asset management. We've improved the Service Manager portal to include additional asset management functionality, and we have more coming in terms of configuration item editing and things like that on the roadmap in the next several months. And then we also have a Configuration Manager portal that we've released that applies the same sort of Cireson methodology to Configuration Manager and brings a lot of that functionality and ease of use out of that product, allowing you to give less access to more people, but overall giving more people access to the Configuration Manager environment in a way that makes sense. And then, of course, we have our consulting services that can help you with what we're talking about today in terms of customization, as well as installation, configuration, and even just to work through asset management training and asset management best practices. So our consulting services is out there to help you with pretty much anything you need around the system center space. Currently, we have customers in 63 different countries. We have over 1,200 customers. We've done over 43,000 consulting hours, and we have over 3 million licensed end users. Currently, our renewal rate is 99%. So thank you all for being with us and continuing to work with us as we continue to grow. We've gotten a number of awards and recognitions, but I mean, that really only matters because people like you guys are keeping involved and keeping us on your servers. So today's agenda, hopping into the actual presentation here, is to go through the various customization methods. There's a lot of them, so I'm just going to focus on the core customization methods. And then there's also the custom search metrics that we'll be showing, kind of how you can set some of that up using things like SQL queries and such. And then we're also going to do a more advanced customization scenario, which in this case will be demonstrating and showing in a broad overview how to create an analyst comment search within the Cireson portal. And then lastly, we'll briefly touch on the platform extensions and what those will bring in future versions of the portal. And then last, we'll have questions. So, customization methods. First up is dashboard widgets. So within the Cireson portal, We have the ability to edit dashboard pages, create new dashboard pages. We go based off of, oh, not refreshing. Thank you for pointing that out. That should help. Rookie mistake. All right, so we've got the front page, how Cireson helps you, which I'm not going to go through again for you. And then our customer page, words recognition, and the agenda, which is where I was. Thank you, Ian, for pointing that out. So back to the customization methods. So customization methods, then we'll go to custom search, analyst comment search, platform extensions, and questions. All right, customization methods. So as I was talking about the dashboard widgets, the dashboard widgets are actually a series of components that you can add to a custom dashboard page that allow you to do things like SQL widgets, OData widgets, OData graphs and tables, same thing with SQL graphs and tables. It's a great way to provide some basic customization just using out-of-the-box functionality. The only thing you really need to know how to do is ask your SQL admin for a query on the information you need, or build it yourself, and you can put it right there into the dashboard widget, which we'll take a brief look at, which allows you to bring out a different set of data very easily from any of the 3 databases that we support out of the box, or additional data sources that support SQL access. So there's quite a bit you can do with just that series of things. Now, we also have a fairly new API in version 8 that allows for dashboard queries. And so we had it in previous versions, but there was some expanded capabilities we wanted to add, and additional security and things like that. So we've actually replaced the old dashboard query with a new one. And this allows for things like token replacements, parameter passing. It is used by our widgets, but you can also use it via API. So this allows you to put in a dashboard query, and that dashboard query can then be queried from within the user interface, assuming that the person is authenticated with the portal. So that is a great way to provide data to an external system, or we will be using that actually in our custom page here that we'll be looking at. And it's also a great way just for us internally to use it in the widgets themselves. So the second aspect of customization, and one that it covers an incredibly broad space, is the custom space. It's a folder right there within your Cireson portal. You can see in one of the background screenshots there that folder exists there in the portal. And basically what you can do is you can add in a custom.js file or a custom.css file. Both come there out of box. Both are empty generally. But what you can do is you can modify the CSS for the entire portal, or you can add JavaScript pages to anywhere in the portal, because those 2 files are loaded by the portal anywhere within the portal. So if you're on the work items page, if you're on an individual work item form, those are loaded, so you can actually manipulate those pages using those custom files. We also have the capability of form definitions, which allows you to actually edit the forms using JSON notification, JavaScript object notification, job notation, sorry. Basically, you can edit those forms out of the box, and you can add in additional properties, rearrange the way they're set up, and you can drop those in the custom space, and then they will take precedence over the ones that are there by default. So this allows you to customize the forms. There's a lot of information on this if you are current customers available in our knowledge base. You can just search for things like custom forms, custom JS. You'll find a lot of information there. If you're looking at the community, you can also find a lot of stuff in the community, including examples. The example that I'm working on today that I built yesterday will be available on the community as well, and also out there on GitHub. So, and I have links to that later on in the presentation once we're finished. So you'll actually be able to access the code that we worked with today in its entirety and use it within your environment if you find it useful. Now, keep in mind, what we're working on today was built in less than 5 hours, so it does have a lot of room for expanded capabilities and, of course, a lot of room for possible bugs. But it should get you started and give you a great example of what can be done. So I went over to custom.js, form definitions, and the custom CSS. We also have the capability of adding view panels. This is relatively new functionality, and there's a views folder in that custom space that includes some, again, JSON description files. And those description files can actually be used to create custom navigation within the portal itself. And we'll actually be using that today, so we'll go over that in more detail in a little bit. But that way you can actually have custom URLs rather than having to reference the custom space. Specifically, it also allows you to load your custom pages directly within the portal as if they were always a aspect of the portal. So that will allow us to move on to the next thing, and that will allow us to actually build custom applications. We actually use this ourselves in certain areas. We've done a lot of consulting engagements. We use this, but we also use it in things like the survey app. The survey app actually uses this exact functionality. So let's talk about a brief example of a customization. This is a very simple example, and we'll actually do a quick demo on this. But what this allows us to do is provide a custom search. So we're going to build a really quick custom search based upon the SQL query you see down below and using the dashboard widgets that we have available to us. So we'll go ahead and start that, and I want to build it right here with you guys in front of me, and feel free to ask questions throughout this process. So let me get this pulled up here. Okay. All right, so looking at this, I have, of course, SQL here. I'm going to open up the basic query that I have over here on the left. I'm actually going to steal it. Just so I'm using the exact query that I was providing. So one of the things you can do when you're working through all of this is you can create your SQL queries right here within SQL against the database of your choice, such as Service Manager in this particular case. So we've built this query here, and what this query does is it actually searches through analyst comments in order to find analyst comments that match a certain term. So the term we have here, today I'm going to focus on the term pizza. And we're going to look for analyst comments, analyst action log comments on work item tickets, so incidents specifically is what we're focusing on. We're going to look for any comments, analyst comments that reference pizza in the comment. So that's what this particular query does. You can see that I actually have 3 of them that reference pizza within the comment itself. You can see down there the comments. Yes, it's a pizza party, good day for pizza, and sausage pizza is the cure. So you can also see that these are which ones private and which ones aren't, and who entered them. And various other queries will also provide the date that they were created. Now, to keep this simple, we're going to focus on this particular aspect for right now. So one of the things we want to do is we want to be able to provide a dashboard that actually talks about these things. So we'll go ahead and log into our portal here, hopefully. There we go. What we want to do is we want to go to our navigation settings, and we want to add a new page. So I'm going to add it underneath search down here. This is the out of the box search, so we'll go ahead and add a page there. So this will be our webinar search page here, and I want to put it down here inside search and make sure that it's visible. And just for making this quick, we're going to make it public as well. So if I go down to my search here, there's my webinar search page. Now open it, And as you can see, it's empty, but I do see the box for the widget template or content layout. I'm going to go with a 3-pane layout here, and I'm going to add some content. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a SQL table widget. Let's put it in the middle. And within the editing here, I want to create this for the Service Manager database. I also want to create a new query. So I'm going to call this webinar demo query. And now the easiest thing to do is to hop back here, copy this, edit this again. Let's try that again. Service Manager, create a query. All right, I'm going to copy and paste that in there. Now, one of the things when you're actually pasting in SQL code is the SQL code worked with this. We don't necessarily always want pizza, though. We may want something that is replaceable, especially if we're using the API. In future versions, we will most likely even be able to pass parameters via the URL into your dashboard, and so you may want those parameters to be replaced. So what you can do is you can actually add in a token parameter in here, and we're using the same sort of format as Angular does. So I'm going to put this in. I'm going to put in search term. So with that, okay, just because. So search term inside the double brackets there. Now when I save and I reselect, it actually recognizes that the search term was inside that query. So with it being inside that query, now I can add in pizza. So now it's going to use pizza within that query itself. Go ahead and let's change the name here. We'll go ahead and hit apply. And there we have it. We have all of the comments that are within this environment. Now, keep in mind the query I took this from was a different Service Manager environment. It was my demo environment, whereas this is an actual release environment that we're working on here. So there's different comments. So as you can see, I have a number of comments. It gives me the work item ID and a lot of information around those. I'll go ahead and save. So that's a quick and easy way to provide a query from SQL with data and then present that data here. It is now can be sorted by comment, can be sorted by when it was entered. So there's a lot that can be done here now just because of that one thing. We can even sort by work item ID here, and now we can see which comments apply to which work item ID. So that's a great way to pull some of that information out. Now, mind you, there's no way for this particular functionality for us to say replace the, there's no way for us to replace the different content that's in there. But we can, of course, edit this and add in different queries. We can, of course, use the same query that we created with those replacement tokens in multiple dashboards and then use different query parameters. So an example of that is I could actually add in another table here with a different parameter if I wanted to see something different. So it really would help you. In this particular case, we're focusing on analyst comments, but this can be used with any functionality from within Service Manager. So we could be looking through incidents for incidents that mention something specifically or that have a certain status or a different token. I mean, obviously, we provide a lot of those out of the box. If you look at our analytics section, so there's a lot of information. You know, all these use various components of these dashboard widgets. So any of these can actually be built with information that's just out of the box. All right, so that is an example and a pretty quick example. Let me go back to the display here. There we go. All right, so that's a quick example of widgets, SQL, and then the API here. Now, one of the things you can do is you can actually use the API to view this information, but we'll take a look at that in just a second. So we'll look at it now, and then we'll hop into our information about our analyst comment search. So one of the things you can do is you can actually use an API tool or outside query to get the information, including passing the search terms to the actual get dashboard data by ID. All you need is the query ID of the query you created. So if you create it in the web portal, you'll have to look that ID up. Otherwise, you can create them via SQL, or you could look them up via SQL if you needed a list of them. But the information is available within here as well. So if we look within the admin settings, we have our spiffy little query dashboard query settings page. And if you would like, you can actually expand the columns here and you can add the ID column. And so from there, you can actually see the ID of your particular query. So if I was looking for my demo query here, we could sort these by what has a name and doesn't. That was probably not the best way to sort that. All right. There we go. So looking through these, I'm already on page 1. Let's go back. You can see all the different ones that we have available to us. And webinar is what I'm looking for, not demo. So here's my webinar demo query. You can see there's my query ID. And then you can use that query ID to access information. I'm using a different one here, but just because I'm using a different query. Once you then run that and hit that API endpoint, as long as you're authenticated and passing that information via your headers, you can actually get the information back just as it was presented. So here you can see a list of all the information. This is the query that we'll be using in the next steps here. All right, so minimize that. So that is how you can use widgets, the API, and then we'll also show custom pages here in a little bit. We did a search for analyst comments. In particular, we're searching for specific terms. You can also search analyst comments by the created date if you'd like, and just have to include that in your query, and then also convert whatever string you're using to search into a date. So we actually won't be doing the date portion, but we will be searching the work item ID, the comment, and entered by. All three of those fields will be searched in our custom search. Looking at the search by analyst ID, you can do that as well if you need a specific ID of the person. In this particular case, we know the name, so we're going to search by name, a little cleaner. And then also because the Service Manager naturally saves the user's name as the entered by field, it works better in this particular case. And we'll be mixing 3 different properties to provide this. So with that being said, I showed a simple example, so now let's show a little bit more complicated example. So in this particular example, this is the content, the materials that I'm using. We're actually using Angular 2 for, depending on how you know it, it's supposed to be known as just Angular now rather than the older Angular JS or Angular V1. This is Angular 4 in this particular case that we'll be using. So we're using what they call TypeScript, and we're compiling it together. Sounds all fancy and complicated, but actually once you do it once or twice, I find it to be, at least for simple things, to be pretty easy and a lot easier than working with a little bit more complex Angular JS application. So I won't go through that. A lot of that's going to be outside the scope of this today, but I did provide some resources here to get you started, and also the GitHub repository that I've made available to you will show some of the information that you need as well, including how to build this particular application when you download it. And you won't even need to do that because I actually include compiled code in the repository in an install folder as well. So all that's available to you already. But basically what we'll be doing is creating and compiling. We configure the base href. We have to set up a particular URL. These are all little things that just because of how we're interfacing with Angular, they have to do. You wouldn't have to do that in a normal Angular application, but small things to make this work fantastically inside existing portal. We'll also work on setting up portal view panels. We'll look at installing the SQL queries, and then we'll look at a baseline custom page that you can get directly from that repository. So a few of the things that we want to build into this today is in the future, I'll expand this out a little bit more, but in the future we would want something like navigation. So we'd want to be able to look at maybe analyst comments or also do a search for user comments, be able to switch between the two. You may also want to be able to provide a parameter in the query, in the URL itself, in order to provide an immediate search. All of that is possible and with just a little bit more work beyond what we have here. We also want to be able to search across multiple segments of a action log. In this particular case, I'm focusing on the ID, the comment, and the creator. So we'll be able to search across all three of those when we do a search. We also want to be able to click through each of the links. So in our case, we want to be able to click into the incident where the comment was made so we can look at more information around that incident. And then, of course, we want to be able to see the results in a way that makes sense, maybe a certain number at a time, which we can optionally use something like paging, and maybe we want to see a total count of what was found despite what we're looking at. So maybe we only show top 10, but we actually want to know that there's 496 or something along those lines, so that we can see just how much that's used. Now, all of this, we'll be using that dashboard query API to get the actual data. We'll just be passing the data from our application to that. Let me answer a quick question here. So could that search term be dynamic in a sense that the end user would specify it at runtime rather than having it predefined? That is coming, Martin. So what we will have is you'll actually be able to specify it in the URL. So I don't know that the end user would specify it, but you could give options to specify it from other links. So you could have like a page of links, or you could even just do it in the dashboard's link itself, so that when you click on it, the dashboard would basically manipulate itself based off of the parameters you assign. So every click could show a different dashboard, really, even though it's all the same dashboard page. A useful scenario there would be if you had a date range in your parameters and you had defined those as tokens. You could then provide that date range in the URL, and every time you view the dashboard, it would show the date range that you provided. So you could actually have a rolling dashboard page without having to make any sort of changes. And they could be sent out via URL through an email, and allowing, say, a manager to come view that when those emails are generated and viewing a certain period of time, like a quarterly or something like that, or a rolling quarter, rolling 3 months, something like that. But just to answer that question, that is something that we have on the docket, and in the near future. We've set almost everything up to provide that. We just haven't quite gotten there yet. All right, so with all those things being said, I want to jump into the demo here in just a second. So one question is, we are using SSRS. Why would I want to alternatively use this reporting tool? Well, it's not just a reporting tool. So I don't have any intent here to replace every form of reporting. What we're looking for is a simple way that a user, or in most cases when I say a user, I'm actually talking about an administrator or an analyst, to be able to build their own dashboard pages without having to be a SSRS expert. To be totally honest, I'm not an SSRS expert. I don't even really like SSRS, but it does work great for what it does, and if you know it, you can do a lot with it. But it's just another thing I have to learn. Whereas here, I can just pull a really simple query, pull the data in, and a lot of it is via UI to get what I want. And I could ask somebody else for a data query who knows what they're doing, and they can give me that query probably a lot quicker than they can build me an SSRS page and such. So it allows for division of responsibilities. It also, like I said, it's prettier. It fits right within the portal itself, brings everything into one area, and there's additional features that are coming. You can also, of course, customize all this, which is what we're showing today. What I'm showing is just a simple example of how we can search through action log comments. But you could expand upon that dramatically in terms of how you do that, the data you get from it, what you can actually apply back into the environment in a similar way. There's a lot you can do with this, and that's what we're focusing on here today, is the ability to customize across the application, not necessarily just in terms of reporting. All right, so let me pull up my page here. So first I want to show you the end result. Like I said, this is not the end all, but this is where we are today, and this is what's available in GitHub. So what I actually have here is I have my comment search. So let's say that I'm on my home page initially, but I would like to find analyst comments that, like we said before, are involving pizza. Now this is a separate environment. I'm going to go ahead and click on custom search, and that brings up my brand new custom page. This is built from the ground up, sits in the custom space, completely configurable. You can do whatever you want with it, build it any way you'd like. If you have a web team, if you have some web knowledge yourself, any of that stuff can apply here. So with that in mind, I want to find the action log entries with pizza. And here we go. So typed in my search, got my search back. I now see that I have 3 entries, which you'll notice match the 3 entries that we saw previously, now that we're back to this demo environment. And I can click on any of these to bring up the actual incident. So when I click on that, loads the incident for me. I can see all the incident information, and of course I can find the action log comment that relates directly to it. And then I can go back to my custom search, and this time I want to find all the action log comments that I individually have put in. So I'm going to search for Seth, mentions me, or that I've actually created. So you can see here that these are all created by me. There's actually 423 results available, but I'm showing the top 10. Over here on the right, I can go ahead and change this, set it to 100, and then I get back all 100. I get 100 of the 423 back. At this point, there's no paging or anything built into this, so there's not really any ability for me to jump through this, but it's just a few changes to make paging available. And at any time, I can, of course, search for something different. If I see something in here that I'm interested in, if I want to know IR 1228 and all the things that are related to it, I can go 1228. And here I actually see all the action log entries for IR 1228. And they are sorted by date. It's difficult to tell because these were all created automatically via a tool to build out the environment. These are not duplicates, they are individuals. I know it's a little bit confusing, but basically you can see the times are a little bit different on some of them. So they're just being built out when we hydrated the environment. But basically I can see now all the incidents, all the action log notifications for a particular IR just by doing that one search. If I wanted to see all of them that use this particular phrase, remember what I said about bugs? There was a bug for you. If I select something, it counts it as a click. But if I wanted to find what said that phrase, then here we go. These are all the action log comments that actually contain this exact phrase. There's 4 of them across really only 2 different action log entries, though they are at different times there, as you can see. So now I can see all the ones that contain that particular phrase. If there was a user mentioned, if there was if it was my kids, I'd be searching for them cussing on social media. So all this is gives you the ability to search through those action log entries very quickly to pull out information that you might find useful. You can, of course, apply charting, things like that to this. So that's what we're providing here. So now I'm going to go through really from start to finish with the next 20 minutes to show how the components that are involved in this particular thing. So one of the things here is that this is handy for comments, but it would also be just as beneficial to look at resolution comments as well. That is an excellent point. And one incredible thing about this is that you could do some minor changes and really change the query on the back end, and you could provide that. You could even mix the queries together so that it looks across all of those things, and maybe even bring them all into the same page. there's a lot of things that are available here. So you can see that I cleared out my search terms, and there's actually 7,000 action log comments available when you're searching for a wildcard. So it's one reason why, and we'll look at the query in a little bit here, but one of the reasons why we're actually doing paging and limiting the number of results that are returned by the query itself. All right. One other question was why this custom search isn't available by default of the product versus customization to add. Well, there's a lot of things that we're working on within the product, including addition, bugs and things for features that exist already. There's only so much development time, so it's just not something that's made it in based off customer requests and added features. We're focusing on higher end, larger things, but it's a great opportunity for me to go through and do things like this and provide some functionality that the community really wants or that the customers really want, and then provide it in a way that you don't necessarily have to do any work. I mean, this is going to be available to you, so you won't have to do any work other than installing this to get access to it. Now, obviously, there's lack of support and things like that, but we are looking actually to move more towards a community-supported sort of extendable portal here. So it's one of the reasons why I have this on GitHub, actually. So we'll actually open this up so that people can fork this and build their own additions to it, and then also request to push those additions back into the base code. And if they do that, then that would be available to everybody. So that's one of the directions we're moving at, is a more community-focused, community-built for areas of the portal and such, where we just don't have the resources to reach into that. But customers who really have those resources and those capabilities and really want it can do it. I'm going to switch the screens here real quick to my other screen because this one here is bigger and a little slower. So switch to one that's a little faster. All right, so let me open up my environment here. So I'm going to look first at the query that I'm using in this particular statement. This is the query that I'm actually using here. This particular query, you can see does some additional things, but basically it allows for things like paging. And you can see that I'm using some parameters here to pass these parameters in so they can be passed in from the API. So we looked at that a little bit ago, how I can actually take a certain number or skip a certain number. This gives me the ability to provide paging from within SQL itself, which limits my results and also improves performance dramatically within the web interface, even over larger quantities of items. So when you're talking action log entries, there can, of course, be a lot of them. And so what we're doing is we're whittling that down a bit and only getting back what we need at any one given point in time. So the first thing I'm doing here, just to walk through this briefly, is creating a variable, and then I'm setting the variable to my token. This token in here doesn't mean much, but it does, of course, within the Cireson portal. So when you're calling this from a dashboard page or from the API, this will, of course, appear as a editable item. So it'll appear as a token. And then I'm looking at just pulling back the work item ID, the various information for the comments, providing a total count. The reason for this is not to be viewed, but rather to be used to page in the future so that I understand how many pages are available and such. But we won't get into that today. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the trouble ticket analyst comment log, and then I'm using the relationship and the relationship ID to actually go through and look at all of the related work items. And then from there, we're joining all of those together and we get our work item information. So this is all part of, these 4 columns are all part of the actual action log comment, and then this particular column is through a relationship, and so we're combining that relationship here using the inner joins. And that's our query. So we're going to use that query. Within this application, I actually provide, so if I look at the code here real quick, pay no attention to all of this yet, 1 second. In an install folder, we actually provide a create data source SQL query. So you can see that that query actually exists here. What this does is actually generates the query in the database for you just by running against SQL. The reason for this is because we want to always have the same ID. That way the web code does not have to be changed. So we delete one if it exists, and then we add in this unique GUID, and then we create this query itself. That way, in your environment, in my environment, and anybody else's environment, we're always calling the same query by ID, and we're getting the same expected results. So that's why we provide this. So you just need to run this against the service management database, which you can see it uses that right there, so it should be good. So that will actually provide the query that we need. So let me bring up my page again here. Okay, so if we go into our settings here, go into admin settings, and we look at our queries, we can see that that query exists. So here's our search analyst comments query. If we were to add in that column, search analyst comments, 9BA2, going back to the other view, you can see 9BA2. So it's the same thing, generates that query in there. Now we can utilize that in the API or in the dashboard itself just by selecting it. So let's look at that. So that's the first aspect of installation. The next aspect of installation is copying the actual folder. So from here, we actually want to copy the navigation nodes that we discussed earlier. So looking back here, and all this is in the README as well, so we don't need to worry about any of that. We'll use this so it's always in my same view here. So going back into here, we also provide this views folder. All you do is drag and drop this views into your custom space. You can see there's already a views there. All I would do is from the source folder. So if we go into here, oops, not in the terminal, Explorer. So if we go into here, we have the install folder. We can actually just copy and paste this into there, and it'll ask me to overwrite. It's fine. It doesn't overwrite the files, it just overwrites the folder. So you can see that there's still plenty of, well, actually I did that wrong. So do as I say, not as I do. But as proof that it doesn't overwrite anything, I dropped it in the actual views folder instead of the custom space views. So from here, in the custom space, don't do in the views folder, custom space folder, drop it in here. It'll overwrite only the same named files. You can see that I added, it has these other things in there. I dragged it and dropped it in there perfectly. So all you do is copy this and copy it into your custom space root folder. This is in the instructions again. And then same thing with this custom search. So this here is the built out files, the production ones. So you can just copy that and you can just paste it right into here. This will continue to change. So as I do updates and I add additional features to this in the community and on GitHub, I will continue to update this with production code, so you don't have to know how to compile an Angular JS thing for this. But if you wanted to build it yourself, there are instructions on how to build this project as well. But learning the Angular is up to you. So that's how you can install the base components of this. Once you have that installed, all you need to do is go to the portal itself, and again, in the instructions, but we're going to just add a new navigation link and point it to our new views. So that views actually creates a URL for us by dropping that folder and the view panels in there. Actually creates a new URL for us. So we can go to navigation here. And in here, we would add a new link, and the new link will appear just like this. And then we use the view. So just think of the views folder in there. We're targeting an individual view from within the views folder. So /view/custom search. This is defined by those components. So if we look at the actual files that are in here, you can see that this has an actual name. So if we scroll down here, it has an ID property, the name of the file itself, and then it points at something specifically. So when we're putting in our navigation node, we're pointing it at the folder or the name of the file that we're looking for. So custom search is the name of the file. We're pointing it at that name of this file. If we then look at the view panels, is just an individual panel that we're targeting. So you can actually put multiple view panels in the content section of this. That's a little overcomplicated for what we're doing today. We're keeping this simple, keeping it to a single view panel, which you can do just about anything you want with a single view panel. And then we're loading the script, we're loading the actual HTML dynamically from this link. So this is important. We're basically saying replace this section with all the code from here, that's one of the most important aspects. But it's all done for you in this particular case. You can just put that in place. Once you fill that in and you put this in, basically what it does is it creates this URL for you. And then from there, you can actually use the URL. When you go to it, it will load that code from that destination that we just showed, which is how we get this. Okay, so with that said, the rest of this is Angular. So from here, we're actually just loading this index file. So that's what that loads. We're setting the base href, which I mentioned in the mentioned in the presentation that we need to set that to our URL. By default, it would just be this slash because it's usually looking or considering itself to be at the root. But we don't want it to be at the root. We want it to be at our custom URL. That's where we want it to load from and start the application from. So that's what we're doing. AppRoot, all this stuff is defined for you. When you build it, it actually builds the code. So let's look at that real quick. It actually does things for you like add in your JS files. So all this becomes pretty self-contained at that point. Just drag and drop it in there. You build it out and it adds these JavaScript references for you. There's some things you need to know that are in the README about this particular one and why you need to do a certain way. So if we look at the README here, you can see that there's you need to use this deploy URL. The reason for that is because we keep the JS files in a different place than where the URL would normally point. So that sets those JS file links, the source for those. It sets this additional source information, which helps so you can actually access those JS files. So this is how I build it right here while I'm working on it. And this information is, like I said, in the README here. But a lot of information here to get you started, enough to get you going where you could actually edit this and play with editing it if you had the time. But you don't have to actually edit anything. You don't have to build anything. You can just follow this installation section here. And by following that, you'll get this installed and up and running. So, like I said, this is Angular 2. So we used a basic Angular 2 template. So once you install the Angular 2 CLI, you can generate a new project. That basic project, we just made those small edits that I just pointed out in terms of the base URL and then making sure and building it with the deploy URL. So those are that will help with this. And then from here, you just need to know a little bit of Angular. You can do things like adding components. In this particular case, we don't have a lot here. I mean, it looks like there's a number of files, but a lot of this is laid out for us. Some of these are test files, which in most cases you wouldn't use without being an actual web developer. So a lot of this is just small bits of information. And primarily what I've done here is laid this out so it shows you how you can do some of this. So this is this service here, this comment service, shows you how you can get those comments from that dashboard query API and how you can pass those parameters to it and get the information back, what you do with that information. If you look through the app modules, it's how you load your modules. the Angular CLI will help you with some of that stuff. And then also what our pages look like. We have routing set up, though we're not using it in the example I showed you, but it is set up here. It's ready to go. We do have some routes defined just so that we're set. So it's just our basic route, which is why it goes to our search page every time, but you could go to any of those search pages. You could add additional pages. And then we just have our basic comment components here, and it shows how to do a component that doesn't immediately hit the web every single time. So we actually delay a little bit here for our value changes so that we're not slamming the database. So I'm showing you how to do that, and also how to set up the actual basics of paging, though it's not implemented. Most of it, there's a good portion of it here, and it will be in the future. And then also how to build out that page and how to display those results. So all this will be available to you. The source code is available to you. And as I mentioned, you don't need to know anything about any of that to make this work for you. And we'll continue to improve upon this in a community focus. It's a personal project that I have. So within the next couple of weeks, I'll continue to build this out for you guys, and we'll continue to add some functionality to it. So keep an eye on that GitHub page. Keep an eye on the community. Going back to the presentation here. Okay, so going back to the presentation, in a minute I'll show you some resources to what we looked at today. One of the future things that's coming that will apply to some of this and go beyond some of the questions that we've had in terms of customization is the idea of platform extensions. And so the Cireson platform is a built component that actually runs in the portal today in the background. Your asset management data gets brought into it. It was introduced in version 8. There is a series of developer extensions that will help you to develop for this that will be coming out in the next few months. And when those come out, they will actually provide you the ability to build your own custom endpoints and not just using, say, the dashboard query endpoint, but building really your own small applications that can be installed into the existing portal. They don't even have to be front end. They could be completely back end, providing different levels of data. They can actually provide calculation. They could, you could have entire tables that are built off of this. You don't have to worry about the database. You don't have to worry about implementing that stuff. You just write a little bit of code and it will actually build out a data table for you. And then you can actually immediately access that data table from an OData or a REST endpoint via an API, which means you can also build a front end on top of that. We'll also be able to include the front end within the actual extension itself to make it very easy to install and upgrade those extensions going forward. That's actually how we built the new asset management functionality. That's how we'll be adding configuration, item editing. A lot of that stuff will be done within that platform, and you'll actually be able to build on top of those as well. So you can use existing extensions that we've provided, and you can use their functionality within your own customizations. And in certain cases, you can even overwrite functions that may exist in a separate extension. So that's coming. It exists today, but the tooling isn't there yet, which is why we didn't use that for today's example. But it also provides you with a way to have new data, new custom data in your environment, not just from a reporting perspective. This is new data, new objects, new entities, things that you can add to your portal that you want to keep track of or extend the functionality of the portal itself beyond what Service Manager even provides. And that's what we're working for the future. And that will be across products for Cireson, including the Configuration Manager portal. So you'll see that sooner than later in those areas. So with that said, here's the resources for today. So you can download the code and instructions from GitHub. So that's available at github.com/Cireson, and that also shows what else we have available publicly. And then this particular one is community_comment search, and you will be able to find the GitHub page there. With the discussion I opened up to this, including a link to that particular code, can be found on the Cireson community, community.cireson.com. There's the link to the actual discussion, which of course links to the GitHub page. Also, the instructions are presented there. So that's a great place to start a conversation around this. Ask for additional functionality. So that should give you everything you need. You can also try the Service Manager portal for free. It does not include custom navigation links, but you can use the custom space within it. So you may not be able to add your own custom navigation links the way we did today, but you will be able to add your own custom URLs, and you can add your own custom pages. You just have to reference those pages yourself in some fashion. So that's obviously a limitation of the free version, but the paid analyst version has no such limitation. And then there's also dashboarding and stuff like that that you can add as an additional license. I know a lot of you have a lot of that already, but for those of you that may not, a lot of this is available to you already for free using the Cireson portal for Service Manager. With that said, let's take a look at some of the questions that we have. So I think I've covered a bunch of them already. What are the top 3 to 5 customization requests? For the most part, those are going to be the top 3 to 5 feature requests that are in the Cireson community. So if you go to the Cireson community, we actually have a feature request section specific to the Cireson portal, and those are listed there. The top ones have to do with configuration item editing, approval pages, send email changes. There's a number of them up there, and we have several hundred feature requests out there. And so I suggest that you go through and look at them and vote up the ones that you want. We do absolutely prioritize feature requests based off of what we see as a business need, with the addition of whether or not the feature request is something the community is looking for. A lot of our past, at least every release in the past, several releases has had some variation or connection to community-related feature requests. And in a lot of cases, like configuration item editing, which is coming, that's a large community request that we are actively working on. This particular webinar will be available for future viewing. I will be passing it on to marketing, and marketing will be making it available. It will also, like I said, most of what we produced today, or most of what we covered in terms of the code and links, is available in the Cireson community with a quick search for analyst comment search. And we will be making this, even the PowerPoint, available. So that will be passed on to marketing from here, and I'm sure they'll blast this out. I will specifically ask them if they can email attendees with that information. I'm not sure what sort of access they have to that. When is the configuration items for portal scheduled? It will be Q1 of next year. We are actively building it right now. So right now it's looking at Q1. And I don't see any issue with making that timeline based on the progress we've made so far. We just want to make sure that we're covering all our bases, and we're trying to slow down some of the features a bit to make sure that they're better, well-rounded, rather than just pushed out just to meet an end goal. All right. Is there any other questions before I end the broadcast for today? Okay. Well, with no other questions, I would say thank you to everybody, and take a look at the code, look through it, see if it's something you find of interest. I suggest that if you have feature requests related to this specific functionality, that you let me know. Put it up on the community or shoot it to me directly, seth.cousins@cireson.com, and we can discuss it and see what we can fit in. If you start using it and you find issues with it, please post those as well. Specifically, if you find issues, please post them in the GitHub project so that I can keep track of them and we can show how they're being resolved. So thanks again thanks again, everybody, for attendance today, and I look forward to hearing from you again in the future. Thanks.